Bera joining me live for his first local interview since returning from Ukraine and Belgium with a bipartisan delegation trying to sort this situation out. Congressman, thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Thanks for having me on.
Congressman, this group of at least 11, including fellow California Democrat Sarah Jacobs, was led by House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Gregory Meeks. He leads the committee that you serve on. What difference do you think it will make in this country's negotiations in how America proceeds for this group to have gone at the end of January and gotten eyes on this issue in person?
Yeah, I think it was important for us in a bipartisan way, Democrats and Republicans, senior leaders on the Foreign Affairs Committee, but also on the Armed Services Committee, to go visit with our NATO allies in Brussels, also members of the European Union, to make sure we're all on the same page together. And I think it's important for our allies to know that Congress, in a bipartisan way, is right there with them. And then traveling on to Ukraine to meet with President Zelensky, their foreign minister, their minister of defense, to get a real assessment of how they're looking at the situation, what kind of equipment they need and assistance as they prepare for a potential invasion from Russia.
The Pentagon has revealed intelligence indicating that Russia was preparing a false flag operation, accusing the Kremlin of an elaborate plot to fabricate an attack on Ukrainian forces so that Russia could use that as a pretext to take military action. President Putin already has more than 100,000 troops amassed at the border. What's your take on this false flag revelation?
You know, this is the standard MO for Vladimir Putin and Russia. It's what they did in 2014 when they invaded Crimea. They created a scenario where they could say, hey, we have to go in and maintain the peace or protect Russian-speaking Ukrainians. The truth is, when you talk to the Ukrainian people, when you talk to their leadership, whether you speak Russian or Ukrainian, they see themselves as Ukrainian, as an independent country. They also remind us that they've been at war with Russia since 2014. The last 8 years, they've continued to defend themselves. And they are not asking for American boots on the ground, but what they are asking for is America and other democratic nations to stand with them as they fight to defend their own democracy.
Californians and Americans across the country are grappling with record-breaking inflation and the lingering pandemic. Some won't understand why the Congress is spending time on this. Why does America need to be involved, need to be paying attention to Russia's military buildup along Ukraine's border?
You know, it's a legitimate question. Families are continuing to struggle as they come out of the pandemic. But the truth is, we're the world's oldest democracy. And what I saw when I was in Ukraine was this young democracy, people who have tasted freedom, who have no intention of living under Soviet autocracy, or in this case, Russian autocracy, I guess. So we, as democratic nations, have to stand up and protect the rights of people to choose their own path forward. And in this case, the rights of the Ukrainian people to choose their own path forward in their destiny. And I think that's what we're doing, standing with our allies in Europe, as well as others around the world.
We have learned that President Putin is sending additional blood supplies to the border with Ukraine. If that doesn't sound like a preparation for armed conflict, I really don't know what does. The Pentagon readying 8,500 troops for deployment, 1,700 landing in Poland today. $200 million in additional U.S. assistance for defensive materials for Ukraine has been authorized, but there has been a bipartisan package of sanctions in development. Is that the way to go, or is that kind of move, dead before Russia acts militarily?
So certainly we're concerned about the blood supplies, the plasma that have been moved up to the front line. That often is an indication of a potential invasion. And we know that if Russia is going to invade based on weather patterns, they probably have to do so in the next few weeks while the roads are frozen. Otherwise, heavy equipment and so forth will be tough to move through slushy farmland and the like. So I think it is important for us to ready sanctions to make sure President Biden has the authorities that he needs. Now, there's a debate going on whether you implement those sanctions before an invasion or if you make sure Vladimir Putin understands how hard he's going to be hit with sanctions as a deterrence.
And so your opinion is, do we do it before or after?
I think some of the things that we're doing, I'm glad that we're moving troops to our NATO allies like Poland, that we're preparing for this. I'm glad that we're moving defensive military equipment to the Ukrainians and getting them prepared to defend their own country. I think you can do minor sanctions I think you can also let them know which oligarchs are going to be sanctioned, what those sanctions are going to be hitting, how it's going to hurt and hit Mr. Putin's pocketbook.
Okay. President Biden has had a rough time of it, a real battle to get the traditional infrastructure bill passed, a stalled domestic agenda with Build Back Better and voting rights reform not getting traction by the deadlines he'd set, and then still not really at all. His last foray on the international stage with the troop withdrawal in Afghanistan turned deadly and chaotic. You yourself having to work hard on the backside to get local students who happen to be there out after America left. The State Department's already warned staff who say they'll have to get themselves out commercially if the situation devolves. The president really can't afford for this to go badly, can he?
You know, I think he's handled it fairly well. Obviously, the withdrawal from Afghanistan could have been handled a lot more smoothly. I do think the message to any American citizens that are in Ukraine or family members, now is probably the time to get out, because if there's a full-scale invasion, it will be very difficult to get out, and there won't be an Afghanistan-type withdrawal where you have this big military airlift. We have prepared the State Department and State Department families, children. They have evacuated. That occurred when we were back there in Ukraine. And, we still have a functioning embassy, and, we're still present there. But again, if you don't have to be in Ukraine, now's not the time to be there.
All righty. Thank you so much for giving us your insight this morning on a situation that's developing as we speak. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Be well.